reading my first YA romantasy novel. I am excited to start reading books outside of my usual comfort zone, and we are starting off with a very popular book. This is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I've been looking up a lot of videos about this book, and I've just been seeing, honestly, I've been seeing a little bit of back and forth, but I've been seeing a lot of people that really love this one. Now, I am not someone who reads YA a lot, so this is classified as a young adult like fantasy romance or romantasy type of novel, but I'm excited to get into it. So this is going to be a reading vlog. I'm going to be taking you along as I read Divine Rivals and kind of giving you my thoughts along the way. I'm excited to try something outside of my usual scope of reading and see what I think and see if this draws me into the fantasy world. I know fantasy is a very popular genre, especially on like Book Talk. I can't say it's my favorite. Every once in a while I'll dabble in with it. I do like some magical realism books, but we will see what I think of this one. So let's get into the synopsis. This says, when two young rival journalists find love through a magical connection, they must face the depths of hell in a war between gods to seal their fate forever. After centuries of sleep, the gods are warring again, but 18-year-old Iris Winnow just wants to hold her family together. Her mother is suffering from addiction, and her brother is missing from the front lines. Her best bet is to win the columnist promotion at the Oath Gazette. To combat her worries, Iris writes letters to her brother and slips them beneath her wardrobe door, where they vanish, into the hands of Roman Kit, her cold and handsome rival at the paper. When he anonymously writes Iris back, two of them forge a connection that will follow Iris all the way to the front lines of battle. For her brother, the fate of mankind and love. Divine Rivals is an epic enemies to lovers fantasy novel filled with hope and heartbreak and the unparalleled power of love. Okay. One thing that I was seeing a lot about this book is people were comparing it to, I believe it was called The Fourth Wing, which I haven't read either, but, and again, this is a YA novel, so a lot of things that I was seeing was like, oh, there's not really any like spice, which I don't really expect from a young adult novel, but it just seemed like people were kind of comparing it to maybe the wrong book. So if you loved The Fourth Wing and you thought it was going to be like that, it's a very different genre. So I'm curious to try it out, and what better time than now to start reading. Okay, so I've made it up to chapter 4, so I'm on page 36, and let's see how many pages. So this one is 353 pages. Okay, my first thoughts are I'm not exactly like reeled in. I found myself at one point that I was like, oh, I should check to see how my Instagram post is doing. I had my phone next to me, and I like grabbed my phone, and then I started scrolling on Instagram, and I was like, Samantha, you were reading. So then I went back to reading the book. So that kind of shows me that, at least for the first 3 chapters, like it didn't necessarily like grab me in right away. I am curious about it though, because I've gotten to the point where Iris's brother, you know, has gone off. We knew that in the beginning. That's how the book starts off. And then at her work, where she's a journalist, she's in this like competition for promotion with Roman, another journalist there, and they kind of this, you know, we know it's an enemies to lovers storyline. and that she uses this typewriter, her Nan's typewriter, to write letters to her brother and puts them in this wardrobe. And then they've been disappearing, and she's been like, where are these letters going? And then this last time that she writes a letter, she hears something in the wardrobe, and she goes over and grabs out a letter that's been put in there, and it says, "This isn't Forrest," who's her brother. So she's like, who sent this letter? Who's getting my letters? How did I get this letter? Like, what is going on, right? So that part I'm definitely intrigued by. And there's a lot of talk of like, you know, this goes to like the fantasy, which again, I've said fantasy isn't, you know, a genre, but I'll just read you this from one of the last pages. She began to write down the lore that she had never been taught in school, the skywards who had ruled Cambria from above, and the underlings who had reigned below. Once there had been 100 gods between the two families, their individual powers spanning across the firmament, land, and water. But over time, they had killed each other, one by one, until only 5 remained. Those 5 had been overcome by humankind and given as spoils to the boroughs of Cambria. Decree had been buried in the west, Enva in the east, Mur in the north, Elva in the south, and Luz in central Borough. They were never to wake from their enchanted sleep. Their graves were markers of mortal strength and resilience, but perhaps most of all were rumored to be the places of great enchantment, drawing the ill, the faithful, the curious. Okay, so I just feel like maybe that part is like what I'm kind of, because I just don't read, I just read contemporary more. So then now I'm trying to like, okay, so there's like 5 gods, and like one's like this Enva is like come back or something like that. So like, I feel like I'm struggling a little. So I'm definitely going to keep reading because I'm still curious about it. I'm only 3 chapters in, but it's a little bit of a slow start for me. I would love to know if you have, I don't know, any tips for reading fantasy books. I feel like that sounds weird. Or when you like first started reading fantasy, if it was just like different for you, because I think I'm just so used to contemporary. I'm still excited to give something else a shot, but we'll keep reading and see what I think. All right, I started my morning off with some hot chocolate and then also getting back into Divine Rivals. So I've made it up to chapter 9. So I'm on page 70 and I'm starting to feel the pull. I'm starting to feel the pull a little bit. As I was making my hot chocolate, I actually brought the book over and put it on the counter and I was reading it while I was making my hot chocolate. But we've seen now that when Iris sends her letters that they go to Roman, and like the house that he lives in kind of has like a mind of its own. Like he can say like turn the lights on and it will, and he says like at sunrise the curtains pull themselves back and things like that, which is interesting. So she sends the letters, he gets them, so he knows that it's her, but she doesn't know that it's him. And he knows that she's been writing these letters to her brother, but he said something to her like, I will gladly read anything that you want to write, like after he said, you know, this isn't Forrest and someone else is getting these letters. And then we also see that he is from a very like well-established family. Like he says in here, like they aren't countesses or viscounts or things like that, but his father, they still are very well off, and his father is very well respected, but they essentially create an arranged marriage for him. So he finds out at this dinner, the other family's over, the daughter is there, and he finds out that he's going to be married in a month to this other person, and he's not a fan of that. The girl's not a fan of it either, but the families are, you know, essentially forcing them to do it. So in the last chapter that I read, Iris finds out that he's getting married because the like engagement announcement comes through. So she talks to Roman a little bit about that, and then he's writing an article about soldiers that are missing at war, and he's like interviewing families of the soldiers, and so she volunteers to help him, and she says, my brother's missing at war. So she offers to help him, so they have lunch, and that's where I left off, is they were having lunch and just talking about it. And again, they're both kind of up for this columnist promotion, and she feels at one point like maybe she is helping him get the job, which she really needs. And, you know, I would say both of them seem like they deserve it, but it seems like she's a really good writer. And even just the things that she says, I wanted to read this passage because Roman says, "What does it feel like? How would you describe it?" Her brother being missing at war. She says, "It feels like wearing shoes that are too small. With every step you notice it. It feels like blisters on your heels. It feels like a lump of ice in your chest that never melts, and you can only sleep a few hours at a time because you're always wondering where they are, and those worries seep into your dreams. If they're alive or wounded or sick. Some days you wish you could take their place no matter the cost, just so you can have the peace of knowing their fate." And then at the end she said she wondered if she had just inadvertently given the promotion to Roman Kid. So that's where I've left off, and I feel like I'm getting a little bit more invested into it. I'm learning a little bit more, so you know, a little bit of a slow beginning, but I'm interested. So we're going to start chapter 9. All right, it's been a minute since I've done a check-in for Divine Rivals, but it's holiday season, things are crazy. We're just making it through the best that we can. But I do want to give an update on Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, because I've been saying in my first few times that I was talking about the book that I wasn't necessarily super pulled in, and that, you know, I don't read a lot of more YA, I don't read a lot of more fantasy, so I was like, I'm not sure how this one's gonna go for me. But I have made some decent progress on this. I'm on chapter 21 or page 147, and I will say that I feel like it's really started to grab me now, especially the love story is getting more and more interesting. Iris has also been making some pretty big moves. I don't want to give away too much of the book because we do have, I don't know if I would necessarily say a plot twist in the sections that I just read, but we have, you know, something personal that happens to Iris that really makes her kind of change, something kind of shifts in her, and she's like, I need to do something different, I need to do something else. And she really stands up for herself in a big way and makes a big change. And I was like, ooh, okay, girl, get it. And obviously with the love interest with Roman, you know, things kind of take a turn for him. He kind of has this family responsibility that he feels pulled to, that he feels like he needs to do. We've also been able to figure out kind of the mystery with how they're getting these letters back and forth to each other. And it ties in with the typewriters. Iris wasn't sure if maybe it was the wardrobe in the house. So when she went to make a move, she was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep passing these letters back and forth. But then we figure out that it's actually the typewriters. But I feel like there's something else that's going to come out with the typewriters. There's going to be something else that we're going to learn with these. We know that they have this magic, and we've kind of been given a backstory on where they came from and how both Iris and Roman got to have them in their possession. Maybe I'm wrong. I just feel like maybe something else is going to come out about the typewriters as well. But it looks like I'm just shy of halfway through, and I'm really happy that it started to pick up for me and that it started to get more interesting, and that I've started to get more invested into the characters. That's what I was really hoping was going to happen. But, you know, sometimes when you read outside of your genre, maybe it won't pull you in right away, but stick with it and then maybe you'll get there. But now, you know, each night before I go to sleep, because I did just finish reading Rich AF, which is what I was normally reading before I went to bed. But now I'm reading Divine Rivals, and I'm getting more and more interested each chapter that I read. Right, I have finally finished reading Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I'm not gonna lie, this took me a little bit of time, and it's not necessarily just all on the novel and my thoughts on it. I read so much faster on my Kindle, and also the books that I'm reading on my Kindle are books that I have agreed to review for authors and publishing houses that I work for. So I try to get those through those very quickly, because some of them want like early reviews from me, some want my reviews to be going up right around the time of the book release. So something like Divine Rivals, this is a book that I, chose out for myself and chose to read for myself. So when it came to reading, a lot of times I would prioritize what I needed to read for my reading schedule, my reading review schedule, versus what I'm just reading for fun. So that is one thing I want to say. But I know I started reading this book back in like October, but I finished it. I think I technically finished it in January. So, it took me a little bit of time, but we have finished Divine Rivals. Okay, so fantasy books are not going to be my favorite. And I kind of thought that going into it, but I was like, even though I've dabbled in a little bit of fantasy in the past and it's not been my favorite, but like, why not give it another try? I have my beauty YouTube channel as well, and it's like, oh, I don't always like brow products that are like, like a brow gel, but every once in a while you try one and you're like, oh wait, I really like this one. So it's like, you never know, right? So I wanted to give this a try, and I did like the novel, as in I liked the romance between Iris and Roman, and that was definitely the parts that intrigued me the most. Where I kind of kept getting lost, and I kind of kept not like picking up the book as much as I normally would, is I just don't, just the different worlds is just not for me. So we have like these different worlds, we have these different gods, and we have like the war going on, and I just felt like I couldn't keep track of it. Like, I really liked reading about Iris. I thought she was a very sweet character. I felt a lot of sadness for her. Her brother is at war. We have a situation with her mother, which was quite sad. She's, being passed over for a job at the newspaper for a guy, which is, pretty standard. So it's like, I felt a lot of things for Iris, and I loved the part that I really did like too was the little bit of magical realism with the typewriters. So Iris has a typewriter from her grandmother, Roman has the typewriter from his grandmother, and they can actually send letters back and forth to each other because of these magical typewriters. Like, to me, I think if you would have dropped this plot into a modern day storyline, I think that I would have loved it. But because we have like so many other things going on, I just couldn't get so invested into the book. So it's not that I'm saying that this is a bad book. I think I'm going to give it like a 3.5-star review. If you are someone who loves fantasy, and it's funny because I've heard people say that this is not like a true like fantasy book, or there's not that much fantasy in it, because to me it was a lot. To me, I was like, what is going on? But I'm someone who likes books set in modern day time. I just do. And not even just in modern day time, in like modern day, like location, scenery, all of those things. That's just my preference as a reader. But I do think it's fun to step outside of the box every once in a while, try something new, have your mind be a little bit expanded. And like I said, I really think if you would have taken everything else about this book and put it into like, it's set in Maine 2022, like I probably would have enjoyed it so much more. So I still liked Divine Rivals. It does leave you on a cliffhanger, and I believe the second book is out. I think I'm saying that correctly. I don't know if I feel a strong urge though to grab it. Like, I would like to see the continuation of the love story between Iris and Roman, because that I thought was very sweet. I also liked a lot of the secondary characters, like who Iris meets when she goes off herself to be a war correspondent. Like, I really liked those characters, and I was curious about them and would like to get to know more about them. I just don't know if I feel a big pull to reach for book number 2. But I am very curious to know if you have read Divine Rivals, your thoughts on it. Of course, I would love to know what are the main genres that you read. I think for the next few books that I choose on my own, I'm going to go back to, kind of my contemporary romance, chick lit. I mean, I like to throw some thrillers in there. I do also like personal growth. Like one book I finished recently was Rich AF by Vivian Tu. So I'm gonna dabble in mostly with those, but then maybe something will come along, another fantasy romance book, or just another fantasy book in general that I do decide that I want to pick up. But Divine Rivals I thought was good, but not for me, not for my reading taste. Same with makeup, like there's definitely products that can be good, but it's just not your like personal preference. That's kind of how I feel about Divine Rivals. But I would love to know if you read the book, if you're reading the second book, or any book recommendations that you might have. I hope you enjoyed this reading vlog. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.